Speech Sister Show. I am so excited for our guest today. We have Barbara Fernandez. Barbara, I'm going to let you give your introduction, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. The reason why I even invited you as a guest is I have an intern who is an absolute fan. She sent me a link to your book, Sis, You Got This. And she's like, "Are you going to interview her?" I'm like, well, yeah, now I gotta do it. I didn't even know that this book existed, and I'm just like, well, thank you so much for even sending this to me. I think that this is the book that, especially the new generation, she's a clinical fellow, so the new generation of speech language pathologists definitely need. One thing I did want to touch on is your business Smarty symbols, and I've always seen them in TPT products. I know that we did clarify that you yourself is not a TPT owner, which I think is even more magnificent that Teachers Pay Teacher store owners are able to use your products and use them all over the United States.
Thank you so
So,
much for
Barbara, I'm
having
going to
me.
go ahead and let you.
Are we good with our sound or are we having a little delay? Are we good?
We're having a little delay, but we'll work with it. That's all right.
Uh,
There's a little bit of a
all
delay.
right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I am looking forward to answering the questions that you have and sharing a little bit of the things that I've learned along my journey. I am an SLP, and these days, when we are in these awkward moments in social situations and people ask, "So, what do you do?" The very first question everybody will ask after they ask your name. And I feel reluctant these days to tell that I am an SLP because it it leads into, "So, where do you work? How often do you see kids?" And I haven't seen kids in 10 years. So I have my own business. So I started my business it was 2009, so about 15 years ago. And it's been the journey of entrepreneurship. I feel I'll always be an SLP because that's what's driving my mission. But I tend to not say that I'm an SLP these days, even though that is my background. I'm more of an entrepreneur SLP.
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, congratulations for that. I went into full-time entrepreneurship, and now I just say I'm a speech pathologist by trade. That actually happened to me at the pool today. He started asking about what disorders I work with, and my mind just drew a blank. And I'm like, you know what? Honestly, I do consulting. So, but I have the degree. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your why you even started your company, and also why you joined the field?
So, a lot of my questions will have so many parentheses, I feel, because I have a.
Okay, everyone. So we lost her for a second. I'm sure she's going to make her way back. So in this moment, what I'll just say again, she wanted to send me an article or a YouTube link that I'm going to have at the end of the show notes when I post the replay. And it says, "I am not just a speech pathologist, I am Barbara Fernandez." And so, if you are a speech language pathologist listening to this, I can definitely attest to even just that. When I was first year out of my clinical fellowship year, someone asked me, "So, what do you do?" Because, of course, they saw me and I was stressing out. Had all my raw data sheets and it was progress report time. And of course, I didn't do what I was supposed to do throughout the time to make sure I wasn't in the position to overwork myself. And I still didn't even know what to say. I'm like, oh, well, I'm a speech pathologist. And how do you even answer that? So she is back on.
Here I
Hi,
am.
Barbara. You're
I
back. You're back.
think I think I'm back, but I can't see myself, so I don't know if you can see myself.
I can see you, but you are a little bit frozen. Let me see. Okay. Can you see yourself now?
I'm still frozen.
What if you refresh the screen?
Okay, that's what I did earlier, and that's what I had to.
Okay. Sometimes we are on. a platform. Sometimes there are technical difficulties, so I do appreciate the patience. We have you here now. I see you moving.
But yeah, I can see. You still can't see me. Um,
How
Let me
about
try to do it from my phone.
okay.
And of course, the technical difficulties have to happen with a person who is supposed to know about technology.
We love the irony in that. It's all right.
Allow. Now I'm putting my name and all
All
right.
right.
I
Fabulous. Fabulous.
maybe if I turn it like this. There we go. No.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we got to see a little bit of those smarty symbols. You're gonna need to press the camera flip. There we go.
There we go. I need to you can still see me,
I
right?
can still see you. You're moving and the quality is great. Is the lag still there?
The leg is not here. Now let me put my phone in here because I do have a stand right here. All right. We're back in business.
We are back in business. And what was going through my mind, I'm like, you know what? I'm sure God had a plan for that. So he's like, no technical difficulties. I need this to run smoothly. So that's all right. We're just
There
getting
we
started.
go.
All right. So you were telling us a little bit about your why.
And I was explaining how because not only I was 17 years old and I had to pick a major, so that was done back in Brazil. That's where I got my undergraduate degree in speech pathology and audiology.
Mm,
Um, so my why back then it was a 17-year-old why, which couldn't possibly be relevant today. And quite honestly, I feel that this is how life should be as we change and we evolve. Our why changes. So I don't even think it is appropriate for me to share or relevant my why of 17 years ago. And trying to think of my why of today, and I see how fluid this answer is because of the nature of what I do, and I do so many different things. Um, and one thing that I realize is in thinking of your why is why do I get up in the morning and I sit here on my desk to do a similar thing that I did the last day? And I think a quick answer for this is because it continues to bring me joy
mm,
and because I'm good at it and because it's fulfilling something that I think it aligns a lot with who I am. So I think it's somewhere in between those three things that allowed me today to continue to do what I do on a daily basis. And I hope that as we are lucky to be in a field that is so diverse, people continue to ask, is what I'm doing today or the reason why I'm waking up today still bringing me joy? You
mm.
know, there are going to be moments in when it doesn't. I do have a lot of stressful moments within a day and very stressful days within a week. But ultimately, it continues to bring me joy and fulfills me. And when it doesn't, maybe I'll need to look for something else. Um, so I think that it's kind of a way of that I look at these things.
Well, I like how you said if it doesn't bring you joy anymore, we should reassess what we should do next. And the next question I was going to ask you was a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. how you even got to that point. Would you say that that's kind of how it got tied into? And the reason why I ask is because I know that there are some speech pathologists listening to this, and they must be looking ahead at August, September when school starts. Like, actually, I am burnt out and I'm actually getting the fall scaries. So that was kind of a double question. But the first thing I would ask you is what would you tell to that speech pathologist who's like, actually, I don't know if I'm exactly getting joy from my current role?
So you did ask a lot of questions.
I did.
Um, would you like me to answer that last part of?
Yes, yes. So the first question is what would you say to that speech language pathologist?
Yes.
Yes.
So I talked a little bit about this in a different podcast,
Mhm.
and this was a lot of brainstorming to be able to get to this answer.
Mm,
And um, I think if I was, let's say that I'm acting as this person's mentor,
okay.
there is a deep need for all of us to understand who we are and how we function. And so in this journey, I would say, why is not bringing you joy? Can you pinpoint the aspects? You brought up the word burnout. And I want to make it clear that just because something brings me joy, it doesn't mean that I don't get burnout from that. So don't be chasing a myth that whenever you get to live the life of your dreams, that you aren't going to feel burnout. I've had many moments in which I went upstairs and told my husband, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to put my business for sale, and whoever offers me whatever, I'm going to let it go. I can't do this anymore. So this didn't happen once or twice. It happens. And so I think demystifying this idea that just because I'm truly living the life of my dream, it doesn't mean that I don't get burnout, because sometimes we end up chasing a life of what we perceive others to be having, and it's unachievable. Um, so in that aspect, going back with that cleared out of the way, um, I think once you can pinpoint what it is that it's um, creating that barrier for your enjoyment on your role as an SLP, then I think investigating what are you good at or what do you want to become good at.
Mhm.
I am not a people's person, even though most people who know me would disagree with that. I'm an introvert by nature. Um, and I could not ever be a salesperson of my business. So I would not be looking for positions if I was an SLP in the school to become a sales SLP in somebody else's business.
Mhm.
Um, I don't do well with, um, I was going to say structure, but the repetitive routine, it constrains me, and it takes away a lot of the joy, the flexibility that I need as Barbara to function. If I don't have decision making power, that is it really weighs heavy on me. So, for example, I could never run for any position within ASHA, for example, within a governmental organization, because that structure doesn't go well with who I am. So, in answering that question, is go figure out who you are, what you like, your traits, and then start that process, which can take a lifetime to get there. Huge
Mhm.
answer there, right? It took forever to get to some kind of answer.
Well, yeah, I think that people held on to every word like myself. So, honestly, thank you for that and that healing answer, honestly, because I can imagine even with myself, um, I feel burnt out sometimes, and I'm like, "Am I crazy? Am I crazy for doing this?" Sometimes I can't get out of bed, and I'm like, what's the difference at this point?" But then I look at where I was before, and like you said, with the structure, and being able to choose what I do every day within the business at least. And that is where I find the joy again. So that makes me want to bring it back to you on your entrepreneurial journey?
Okay, so what is there a particular thing you want to know? Or
Honestly, I was thinking from start to finish. So, what made you think of the idea for Smarty Ears? Was that where it started? Where did it start? And where are you now? Where do you see it in the future?
um the cool thing with that open question that could take us 2 hours to get there is that it allows me to share something that I love telling people is that I had no clue what I was doing. I had no intention of opening a business or running a business or living or leaving the school district when I started Smart Years, which again takes away this idea that Barbara was just sitting here and then one day I want to accomplish A, B, C, D, E. Let me sit down, write a business proposal, a business plan that will get me to that point. Barbara doesn't function that way. Barbara goes with the flow. So I was working public school as an SLP in a preschool, and there was no iPad. It didn't exist. And I had just spent before I actually even started working, I used the money I didn't have yet to buy my iPhone, my very first iPhone. Um, hoping that even though I did have a job, I hadn't started yet because I got it that summer. And as I allowed one of my students to use it, just look at photos, I'm realizing, I think there's something here. Um, could I create something? And then it became a quest to figuring out, could I create an app for an iPhone as a speech therapist? I have no coding background. Yes, I knew at the time how to build websites, which is how I ended up learning English for free back in Brazil. I traded my website designing skills to be able to go to English school for free because I couldn't afford English school. I was already in college, but sidetracking there. And so I couldn't do that. And then I posted an ad on Craigslist. You look very young to know what that is, but
I do. I know.
so it's like almost I feel these days when I tell the young SLPs that I put an ad on Craigslist, they're like, you put a newspaper ad. I'm like, kind of like that early on. Any rando could answer, pretend to be whoever they wanted. And Barbara met with a rando at a coffee shop and told my idea. And I said, how much is this going to cost? And he's like, $4,000. It was the very first app where you could select a sound and have your target words for articulation and track the data. So I said, okay. He goes, well, you pay half now and you pay half as soon as I'm done with the work. And $4,000 were close to my month worth of a salary of a school-based SLP 15 years ago. And I said, sure, here's $2,000. I had just bought my first house and, I had all the debt and all the payments every regular person has. I didn't have any safety because my family's in Brazil. It was, here's my $2,000. Let's do this. These rando guy that I had no references, no resume, no nothing, did not steal my money. He actually delivered me the app. I worked, of course, on the word list, the images, naming, and all of that. And he guided me how to become an Apple app developer. And so I submitted the app. And I was excited that I was going to sell this one app with no intention of making anything else for $29. And I figured if I sell one a day, how much is that? Oh, I'm going to have vacation money. So that was my business plan. I got no receipt for paying the guy, really just winging it. My first booth at a trade show at Tisha, I had these balloons. They made me pop. My booth looked awful. For years, I was very embarrassed at how my booth looked. So a few years forward, then I was able to transition from full time at a school after I had 5 apps published, which was within 6 months. And then I transitioned into doing evaluations as an SLP twice a week to full time in my job, in my business within the year. And then a year later, my husband was able to quit his job as a teacher. And then in this process, we created about 74 apps on the App Store. Then I needed images for these apps for various different apps. Instead of licensing from existing ones, I wanted to build my own library of images because something peculiar about them, they all looked exactly the same. So it was the young, bald stick figure representing a young boy. And I'm like, girls should even exist in AAC and visual support. So I built our library, and it grew and became a separate business entity that became Smarty Symbols. By then I was a little bit more business savvy. I knew a few more things, 5 years in, and now Smarty Symbols and Smarty Ears are two separate businesses that function and operate with different employees, different personnel, different missions. Smarty Symbols has 35,000 images, making visual support more diverse and inclusive, more modern. And these businesses, I operate in different functions, still creating and fulfilling the mission that it is to break communication barriers, which is the same mission I do as an SLP. It's just now I'm able to support my colleagues and families in a different way with doing something that I'm really good at, which is creating solutions for things that I believe are existing problems. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, honestly, for that answer and for walking us through your journey. I have definitely seen the symbols, and I'm thinking of one TPT seller, Nikki, Teach Meets 365 specifically. And so she always has all these diverse symbols. So it's really nice to know how you got from just the boy to what it is now. So that makes me want to ask, can you tell us about how you came up with Sis, You Got This?
Yeah. So in 2021, at a national convention, I had a couple experiences. Um, and I was at my booth, and I had received a text from one of my closest friends. And she said, I'm sending a student to talk to you. And because she spoke up at my presentation, and I said, you need to go meet Barbara, go find her at the Smart Ears booth. And here comes this girl. I had no idea what this was about. And as soon as I see her, she sees me, I immediately knew or had an idea of what this was related to. And then she shared her experience as an immigrant Latina SLP and the things that she was currently struggling with. This was in 2021, which was 20 years after I graduated myself. So she was getting her PhD and sharing her experiences with some of her supervisors in the school district. And, we sat and we chatted for some time. Then that night, I was at an event, also with very close friends, in a place that I have always felt this is my place. This is my group at ASHA. And I had an encounter with a supervisor from my graduate program when I was a graduate student. Or that interaction that I had with her that night reminded me how things haven't really changed, even though it had been 20 years. She was able to make me, or to attempt to put me exactly in the place where she had me 20 years ago, in a room full of people, and crying and hiding my tears. And I think having had the conversation earlier that day, going back to my room, I realized that I had a lot of stories that I wanted to share. Stories that I was holding on, or that I had shared only with a much smaller group of people. And at the time, just as you've already seen the pattern, Barbara doesn't have a lot of plans. It was not planned that I'm going to sit and write a book. I just started writing, and I'm like, maybe this will be just a blog post. And I kind of became obsessed and continued to write after the convention while I was still in DC. Came home, and I looked in my bookshelf for my favorite book, which is The Alchemist, and I'm like, I wonder if I can write a book this thick. I consider myself not a good writer. Writing's not my thing. I'm not a reader. I'm a tech person. I'm a designer type of brain. And I looked up on Google, how many words is in this book? 30,000. I'm like, how many words do I have? So then I obsessed for 30 days, and I wrote the book. So the book was written in 30 days. And that process for me was something that I was really needing to go through personally, as somebody who's very emotional, very sensitive. And then I realized that I wanted to share more than just my story. And I started emailing friends. Then I looked at who am I missing from this group that either declined because they were not ready to share anything publicly, or just I realized that there were gaps that I needed to fill within the people that I wanted to share the voices. So then I reached out to second and third degree connections. Then I put out a public post, and I ended up meeting and having video chats with a few people in that 30 days. And some of them wrote their stories. Some of them told me their stories and asked me if I could share it. So it was not a plan. It kind of came together in a massive effort, but it is out there, and I do feel that it is probably the hardest contribution that I've put out to this point.
Why would you say it's the most hardest contribution?
I think it pushed me to look into places and question things, analyze things, that it's so easy for us to just, you know what, this is too hard to deal with. Let's forget it happened, because it's not healthy, or it doesn't feel good to explore these feelings and emotions, these realizations, to ask yourself these questions. And people underestimate the burden that it is to share personal experiences, to listen to personal experiences. And I think for me, that realization didn't come until the book was published. So I understood that those 30 days when I was listening to deep stories, crying with friends and new friends, that those 30 days were hard. And I have my husband and my kids they were very patient and generous with me during those 30 days. But the year after the book was out, the amount of emails, the number of people who came to my booth and cried in front of me, share their stories, understanding the level of pain that is out there, and listening and going through that with them. It's something that these days I sparingly choose to share. So for example, I decline any presentations on the subject, because when I presented at ASHA last year, it was hard to walk through that presentation. to cry in front of 100 people to get the word out in public. So I realized that not only it's a personal challenge, but it is something that I do see that it has made an impact on people and realizing that they are not alone in their struggle.
So that makes me want to ask you, of course, Barbara, I have a million questions I can ask you, but I don't want to keep us here too long. We'll just have to come back for that. But even just pointing to the sis, you got this, and just like how you touched on the different barriers and challenges you faced as a Latina woman, right? How would you say that you've gotten over those challenges and even any possible imposter syndrome that you might have faced, even now?
Whew. So I don't know if there are things, I think a lot of the things that were hard for Barbara are different than the things that are hard for Melanie, right? And as I reflected on my journey and the things that were hard for me, a lot of it related to the underlying assumptions about how I sounded. You are a very recent immigrant. I moved here, I was 21. I did not speak English at 21. So, and I went as a 21-year-old into our field. And then when I started my business at the age of 27, I thought it was a good idea to make online videos on YouTube. And people were writing comments on my YouTube videos, our fellow SLPs, on how inappropriate it was for me as an SLP to be making videos and sounding that way. So I see that my challenges are mine. And even though there is a huge intersection of our struggles, the things that were barriers for me and continue to be barriers, or at a lesser degree, are directly related to my particular story and journey. And so in answering the question of imposter syndrome, a lot of this is related to public speaking. A lot of this is relating to my ability to be an SLP to begin with. How can you not use your prepositions correctly? You know, Barbara didn't always sound like this. If you're curious, go look at the old videos on YouTube. They're all there. And that was already Barbara under a lot of accent reduction programs, because I did all of those. So these days, I would never go back and watch a replay of what we're doing right now. I still cannot hear myself. I can't go back and listen to my audiobook. Asha worked with me on putting a video highlighting me. A friend of mine sent that video to approve it before they went out. You know, I went in a studio, it's a whole big thing. And I'm really proud that I did that. But I told her, go ahead and publish it. Good. It is good. I have never watched that video. This is not, 2019, 2008. This was 2022 Barbara. So again, this idea that just because we're living fulfilling lives, that we aren't still struggling with a lot of things. Now, obviously, I'm a huge proponent of therapy, and I do this every week for 4 years, and I will do until the day I die, because it's a journey of self-discovery. But the things that, as far as overcoming imposter syndrome and overcoming our struggles, it's really tied to how we're structured and what we went through, and made it something that I will never overcome. And I'm still dealing with this.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that heart-filled answer and that heart-filled interview. I already have someone in the comments, Kaylee comment. I know that she's in graduate school, and she wanted to touch on how she says, as someone who feels a wide range of emotions in this field, hearing that loving the field doesn't mean that you won't get burnt out means a lot. So I just know that again, everyone is clinging to every word, even if you might think that, oh, I mean, this is just my story. Your story is so powerful and so healing to a lot of people coming into this industry. What would you say that you would like to see changed in this field?
Hmm. Seeing change. Um, I think motherhood has given me a different perspective. Having kids who received services in, both before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID, I've had moments of being the mom that she tries to pretend she's not an SLP, so that the evaluator doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I have an SLP watching me. And then all of a sudden I'll go and say a word like phone name instead of sound. And I'm like, oh, she caught me. I have had a shift in perspective in the things and the way that we should support families. I see that my kids are in a very privileged position in having an SLP as a mom. That I do therapy with both of my kids every day. Every conversation, we are pretty much doing speech therapy. Um, but seeing that the demands that we have as a field, huge caseloads, um, and lots of kids needing our support, and seeing that this has been trickling down into the services to the kids in reduced amount of services. Everybody now gets 30 minutes a week, and as if this is going to help kids, instead of us finding a way to advocate for ourselves with our employers. So as a mom, I have who understands school districts. I personally went to superintendents and special ed directors and scheduled meetings to talk about the bigger issue of my kids shouldn't all have 30 minutes. They're not ready to be dismissed, but that SLP has 85 kids. So what I'd like to see is seeing if we collectively could brainstorm effective ways to advocate for the kids that we are here to support. That even though we are struggling, everybody's burned out. It is unfair that you have 85, 100, 150 kids. But we also have a responsibility that we should be challenging our employers to do better by us so that we can be the SLP we were trained to be, rather than seeing that trickle down effect, because you will have consequences for that child. And that is a perspective that motherhood has given me. This is a flag for somebody else to carry, but it's just a heartfelt wish for us as a field that we do need to figure out a way to continue truly supporting those that could benefit from our support.
Well, thank you so, so much, Barbara. And of course, I wholeheartedly agree. I can go on for days about that, but we're out of time here.
Yeah.
Where can people find you if they want to know more about you and your work?
So I probably Instagram is the quickest way to get a hold of me. My email has thousands of messages. As Melanie will attest, uh, I'm still very last minute. Things are expiring right now, email crazy, then I'll try to get to it. So if you want to just send me a quick message on Instagram, Geek Barbara, that is the best way to get a hold of me. So I can respond while I'm at the pool or, my personal time, I'm able to get to it.
Well, thank you so much, Barbara. Anyone watching the replay, I'll be sure to put all of that in the show notes, and also a link to your book in the show notes as well. So that way people can check that out. Well, thank you everybody so much for coming. I will see you this Saturday when we talk to Daniela Muniz from Spanish Psychology. Thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us today.
Thank you, Melanie.
Okay.